The Great Depression, presented by Ciana, Hannah Skinner, and Julie Verley. In this documentary, we are going to be focusing on how Wall Street influenced the economy and how the crash of '29 affected America. Hamilton's economic vision for the United States laid the foundation for a strong economy and paved the way for the New York Stock Exchange, also known as NYSE. Wall Street became one of the most important financial centers in the world. Before Wall Street was a financial center, it was popular for slave trade, starting in 1711. Men made their fortunes by trading slaves in auctions on Wall Street. Merchants later gathered to create the Buttonwood Agreement on May 17, 1792, to establish the trade practices and organize security among stockholders. The amount of stocks bought in exchange rose as America's population economy grew. Banks, insurance companies, and railroads issued stocks to develop and expand. By the end of the Civil War, over 300 various stocks and bonds were traded at the NYSE. The exchange moved into its first permanent home on Broad Street in 1865. Then, in 1903, the modern New York Stock Exchange building opened up Broad Street and Wall Street. This new decade was known as the Roaring Twenties, as a period of economic and social growth in the U.S. In the first half of the 1920s, companies experienced great success in exporting to Europe, which was still rebuilding from World War I. Unemployment was low, and many job opportunities and efficiencies boosted the economy. The economic growth created an environment in which involvement in stocks became a hobby, with the general population craving a piece of the market. People started buying stocks as they were convinced that it was a way to earn easy money, which led to the oversupplied stock market. Overspeculation of banks, increasing shares and interest rates, agricultural overproduction, panic selling, and negative influence of the media industry were significant factors that led to the crash of '29. The banks were overextending bad loans, making them less stable. Public utility and investment stocks utilized debted money, making the banks more vulnerable to the coming crash. The stock market was forced to throw out these extra stocks, caused panic selling, as the share prices fluctuated and many investors were wiped out. The Americans then began withdrawing cash, leaving the banks with several losses. On October of 1929, the stocks were 11% lower than usual, wiping out billions of dollars, and many believe paved the way for the Great Depression. The stock market crash and the Great Depression following directly impacted nearly every aspect of society and changed an entire generation's perspective and relationship to financial markets.
The crash began on October 24, 1929, known as Black Thursday. Institutions and financiers stepped in with bids above the market price to stem the panic, and the losses on that day were modest, with stocks bouncing back over the next 2 days. Before the crash, which wiped out both corporate and individual wealth, the stock market peaked on September 3, 1929, with the Dow at 381.17. The ultimate bottom was reached on July 8, 1932, when the Dow stood at 41.22. From peak to trial, the Dow experienced a staggering loss of 89.2%. On Black Thursday, false reports crackled around Wall Street that distraught bankers and investors were leaping out of high-rise windows and plummeting as quickly as the stock market itself. The New York Daily News reported, "The day after Black Thursday, if half the suicides which were reported to Trader yesterday had proved true, Wall Street would be a deserted village this morning." It was difficult for many to understand why people should go hungry in a country possessing huge food surpluses. Blaming Wall Street speculators, bankers, and Hoover administration, the rumblings of discontent grew mightily in the early 1930s. By 1932, hunger marches and small riots were common throughout the nation. However, not all students were caught up in social eruptions. Many were too downtrodden or busy surviving day to day to get involved in public displays of discontent. Instead, they placed their hope and trust in the federal government, especially after the election of Franklin D. Roosevelt to the presidency in 1932. The crash wiped many people out. They were forced to sell businesses and cash in their life savings. Brokers called in their loans when the stock market started failing. People scrambled to find enough money to pay for their margins. They lost all faith in Wall Street. During this time, stock prices plummeted. 9,000 banks went out of business, 9 million savings accounts were wiped out, 86,000 businesses failed, and wages decreased by an average of 60%. The unemployment rate, previously at 9%, rose to 25%, which left almost 15 million people without jobs. The country slid into the Great Depression with increasing unemployment. Failing production and prices continued throughout President Hoover's term of office from 1929 to 1933. As banks and businesses began failing, workers lost their jobs and their income. The owners of bankrupt banks and businesses also lost the income they had been making from those companies as owners. In 1933, the unemployment rate hit 25%, and 1 out of every 4 workers in the country could not find a job. As people lost jobs, many of them could no longer pay rent or make payments on home loans. A large number of unemployed people became homeless and often went hungry. Some even ended up living with other out-of-work families in shanty towns, which is a poor, roughly built house. It was truly a desperate time for all the people.
The New Deal. Was that something that black folks in your community felt? I mean, was there something different about, how was it different than what had gone on before with Roosevelt? Was there a sense that this was a different time now, something had changed, and was it something that felt hopeful, or did Roosevelt have any impact on your family's life or your community's life?
Yeah, Roosevelt did have a tremendous impact, and the New Deal, on the life of my family and my community, but not at the very beginning. Politics was something that took place up north. The Depression, even the crash of the stock market, that was Wall Street. And Wall Street was where evil people lived who made money at the expense of other people. The white South and the black South both looked upon the crash almost as a kind of punishment to the people up there. It was only later when the New Deal began to articulate programs.
During the height of the Great Depression, the president at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, established the New Deal, a deal that was implemented to help alleviate the debt and economic stress placed on American citizens during the Great Depression. The first 3 months after the New Deal, also known as the 100 Days, introduced many new corporations and institutions such as the Works Progress Administration, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, National Recovery Administration, and Social Security Administration. These were established to help prevent future economic crises in America. The WPA, FDIC, NRA, and SSA are some of the programs that were established in the 1930s and still in action today.
Also during the Great Depression, about 9,000 banks collapsed, leaving America poor, hungry, and unemployed. As a result, the FDIC was created to help recover and prevent any other collapses. One policy that made a notable change was the amount of money insured to bank clients. The maximum deposit insurance guaranteed to clients is up to $250,000 now. Compared to before, there was no insurance for bank customers or companies facing bankruptcy, so they would be left with nothing. This change helps prevent banks from experiencing mass failures while also ensuring client security to their money.
But the government programs, were there, and not only did they provide a service that was needed, but they put into positions of authority and power black folks. There were black farm agents who went out and worked with the farmers, and black teachers, people who got these little jobs and who did service the community.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Revolutionary New Deal taught America, and especially the federal government, how essential their role was in aiding America after an economic crisis. The New Deal also teaches us how regulations, rules, and safety precautions are vital in establishing the safety of the welfare and social affairs of the American citizens. Even though the New Deal benefited the American people, the impact was not seen right away. Additionally, the New Deal was not only useful to the white population, it also impacted the African American community as well. As David Ossie says, the New Deal created a multitude of new jobs for African Americans to step into, like teachers, farmers, and farm agents.
The Great Depression was a worldwide economic downfall that began in 1929 and lasted until about 1939. It was the longest and most severe depression ever experienced by the industrialized Western world, sparking fundamental changes in economic institutions, larger economic policy, and economic proposition. Although it originated in the United States, the Great Depression caused major declines in output, severe unemployment, and deflation in almost every country of the world. Its social and cultural effects were just as shocking, especially in the United States, where the Great Depression represented the harshest hardship faced by Americans since the Civil War.